Welcome to the August 7th, 2018 Helm Charts Chat. We do have meeting minutes, and I threw two things up in there. I'll throw this into chat here. There's the meeting minutes. And so there's a couple of things that I threw in here. One is the distributed search, which is passed. We should talk about how we're going to go about doing this. And then, or I should say the PR issue and PRQ. So those are the two things that I had. Did anybody else have something they wanted to add on to here? I'll take silence as nothing. Awesome, fantastic. So we should probably start with talking about the distributed search. Let me pull that up. So it was a proposal, it was accepted for, or I should say the distributed search. Here is the proposal. We will host it on the, so the gist is basically we'll host it on the Helm domain somewhere like hub.helm.sh or charts.helm.sh or something like that. And in the proposal, it said the charts maintainers will have direct responsibility unless we want to change that up, which we can probably go through and do. And so this was the basic proposal here of how do we go about doing it. And so there's a few things that we need to do. One, we need to get the site up and running and hosted somewhere. There's a few different options for how we want to do it, and I'm not sure, but I can start to chase them down. One is the CNCF does offer some hosting options. They're free out of the box. One, they give you bare metal as a service and you run everything on top of it, which I don't so much like. And then there is the CNCF could actually get hosting through some other organization and we could host it there. And then there's the option of somebody possibly sponsoring running this site itself. And I can chase those down. The first two, which is the CNCF directly doing it, is something that I've talked with them about. I just need to chase down the exact hosting and how we'd want to do it, whether it's Google Cloud or Amazon or Azure or Heroku or who the heck knows what, right? If we wanted to go that route, or maybe there's somebody who wants to donate the hosting space. The big name on that would probably be Microsoft, and I haven't talked to them about that yet.
I think the one, if we're talking about the just the hub,
yeah,
then that doesn't seem like the monocular instance, if that's what you mean, the CNCF monocular instance. That doesn't seem like it should require that much in terms of resources or whatever. But if we're talking about that releaser service that offers CI to distributed charts, I'm thinking we might want to think about the resource requirements for that.
So let's just focus on the hub and not so much the releaser service first.
Okay.
The hub's probably the big important thing to get moving here, just so
yes,
folks have that.
Agreed.
So, and that's all this distributed search proposal included.
Yeah, and that can be a separate conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should, once we have the proposal ready for that releaser service, we can start discussing it then. But for now, I think we just focus on the actual monocular instance.
That makes sense.
But you're right. There isn't. I don't think there's that many resource requirements for that, and also doesn't need to run on Kubernetes as well. So I don't know if Heroku necessarily would work, because it is like a Go backend, and I don't know how well their support is for that. But yeah, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a Kubernetes cluster. It could just be some of a VM infrastructure that we use.
Okay. So I can start chasing this down. I'm actually going to say we don't use bare metal as a service, because then you have to lay down the operating system. You've got to lay down your cloud, your Kubernetes. Then you have to go run your stuff inside of it, and then you got to do ops top to bottom. And while that works great for some folks who want to test this stuff top to bottom, right? Like Kubernetes on bare metal, it's not so great for us wanting to run a monocular instance, right? So I'm going to suggest that we either use a cloud hosting service that's paid for by the CNCF, which should actually be pretty small to do because we're not going to need a complicated cloud, or we look at somebody who wants to donate hosting in order to do that. Since Microsoft makes such an investment, I'm obviously feel the need to hit them up and see whether that's something that they want to do. I can take the action to do that, or the CNCF route. Those are the two that I know of, and I'm willing to take the action to chase both of those down.
Is there any artifact storage that we need to think about, or is it purely the search? Maybe some
It's purely the search. We're not trying to be a centralized host for all of the things. Think of it more like Packagist in the PHP world than something like NPM in the JavaScript world.
Yeah.
But there's a database, right?
There's a database, yeah.
I haven't actually looked. I haven't even played with Monocular, honestly, so I'm not sure what it uses. But it's got to be some sort of basic storage, like some.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but it's more cache than anything else because it can always be rebuilt.
Yeah, it uses MongoDB right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I mean, we could probably get away with even using something like Google App Engine or any of the PaaS things that the various clouds have.
Yeah. So what I want to do is just see what our options are for this, whether it's going to be sponsored or not. I don't know, or CNCF, and so we'll go take a look at that. And I'm happy to go chase those options down since I've already started the conversation with folks.
I can ping folks at Pivotal because we have Pivotal Web Services, which is a public cloud foundry, so that they might be willing to donate from that.
Okay.
But I would say hit up contacts you already have because it sounds like they might be good bets, and I can always.
So out of curiosity, what's Pivotal's interest in Helm and charts and hosting and being involved in the search? Just out of raw curiosity, I'm actually not familiar.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a Kubernetes distribution, Pivotal Container Service, and we're clearly interested in the helping people run their applications for them space. We're still figuring out what that means inside of Kubernetes. But there is definitely interest in how would we handle dealing with Helm charts and stuff like that. So we definitely have a vested interest in at least general Kubernetes stuff and having a name in the Kubernetes community.
Yeah.
And it's we don't have a specific strategy with Helm yet, but we have I use Helm every day to deploy stuff to my Kubernetes clusters, and so just about anyone doing stuff with Kubernetes.
Yeah, and I'm actually more experienced with Cloud Foundry than you would think. I've run lots of production stuff in Cloud Foundry over the years.
Oh, cool. So. Well, I work at Pivotal. I've never even logged into Cloud Foundry, so you're more experienced than I am.
Okay, yeah, I've dealt with distributions of Cloud Foundry in the past that competed with Pivotal. Mm-hmm. So that's where my experience comes from. I used to work for HP Cloud, and that's where it comes in.
Okay. There was only two choices there, IBM or HP. So
yeah. Or SUSE now. SUSE,
indeed.
They do, although they're going through other stuff. All right. Then the next thing we have is we've got to figure that out. Then we also need to figure out the guidelines for being included in the centralized search, right? So what kind of guidelines are we going to put on folks in order for their stuff to be in there and be maintained in there, right? And so I'm not sure where that is or where we should probably, so part of this thing was actually to create a hub repository. So we were going to create, so part of the proposal that was discussed, and I don't know if it's in the public thing, was to create a repository to handle the operations of the site and collect that information. It's where we talked about pull requests going into to add a repository for the monocular config file that changes to that could cause it to be reloaded, that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so we need to go create the repository for the hub site and come up with the name. So how do we want to go about coming up with the name? hub, charts, whatever we want to call it. I'm actually entirely indifferent to the name. Should we send it out to the mailing list with a couple options and see what people think?
Sure.
Should we send it to the Helm public list and see what people think?
I think that's probably a good idea. Yeah.
Does somebody want to take that on?
Sure. I think the most important thing is to communicate clearly and give people the correct context. I'm not sure who's on that list. Is it?
It's like 100 people who are interested in Helm.
Sure. I mean, I can sketch something up.
I mean, I'm happy to do it too,
Yeah.
but I didn't know if somebody else wanted to do that.
Whatever. I can help sketch it up in our chat, and whoever wants to send it, that's fine. I mean, I don't mind, but I don't have to either. So,
Okay.
yeah, we can just like typity type. I'll start looking something up now.
Okay.
I mean, I think the most important. I mean, that's a really good idea to get opinions, because the most important thing is that it makes sense to people.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. But it seems like it should be something somewhat semantic, and then it should be. We can always change it too.
All right. So I've put a to-do in there. In fact, I'll even take this on since I've been doing so much of this, unless somebody else wants to. For once we've got a name, creating the repo for it. And then once we've got that, we need to come up with guidelines for inclusion.
There's the obvious stuff like it must pass the Helm tests, but
Mm-hmm.
we even have a way to check for that programmatically. Like, is Monocular able to introspect and look for hints about stuff like that?
Say it again, sorry, Paul.
So, I mean, there's obvious stuff like it must pass Helm linting, right? But is Monocular even able to introspect charts to check for that sort of thing, or would we need to have some sort of CI process?
Monocular doesn't run linter currently.
Also, didn't we say that we wanted the CI process to be optional because some organizations might have very specific testing requirements that we couldn't enforce?
But there's a difference between what organizations do when they create their charts and their CI processes, and our ability, I think, to look at repositories and the charts that are in them to make sure that they meet our guidelines for inclusion. Right. So we
did
should set up.
Yeah. But I was thinking more about testing, because some charts are so specific. Like it can only run on Amazon if you have these operators. And
we shouldn't test everybody's charts.
Yeah.
Let's start with that. We're not going to test their charts, but we can set policies that say you must follow these policies in order to have your repository included in this list. And if you don't, then you can't be included, or if you stop following the policies, you can be removed. And once we know what those policies are, then we can say, are there any of those that we can automate and maybe like automatically file an issue in our queue that says, hey, this thing is no longer doing it. We could run those as jobs periodically. There's lots of ways we could automate those things. But I think first is kind of figuring out what those guidelines are that we expect folks to follow. And I don't know what those are or what they should be. It could be you have to have a maintainer listed on your charts for a point of contact, right? You must have at least one maintainer listed. We could have lots of things like that. So that way these charts are always supported. I'm just coming up with example things.
Mm-hmm.
We probably need to have that criteria in order to do that. And I don't know if anybody's interested in taking this on right now to try and sketch a document out like this that could eventually be turned into an issue once we have the repo.
Yeah.
I think the current linting would be a starting point for this. see what we already have and what we need to add or change.
Sure. So our current linting ones, some of the things would probably need to go. And one of those would be like, if it's not hosted on GitHub, we can't check if it's a GitHub username, right? But our current linting guidelines would be good ones. Like it needs to pass these kinds of guidelines. Reiner, did you want to come up with that since you know this stuff so well, or are you otherwise busy?
Yeah, I could look into this.
Okay.
Yeah, I would bet like just the general Helm lint is probably going to cover a good portion of the stuff we would care about initially.
Yeah, and we can add to this and change it, because one of the things that I'll probably do, or that we should probably do, is once we have some guidelines, run this by the CNCF in case they've got some kind of legal guidelines or other thing that people need to opt into. I don't know, terms of service. I have no idea. And so I would, we should run this by them as well, especially once we have an issue up, and let Dan and Chris and those folks weigh in with any additional thoughts. Right? All right. Okay. And then, let's see. And then the other thing is we need to start teaching folks how to run their own repositories and document how to do this. I can take on the task unless somebody else wants to. What we probably should do is say how to use GitHub as a Helm repository. And maybe even also we need how-to guides.
Yeah, I could maybe take a shot at putting together something like that. Maybe just write it out as like a Medium post or something, and just put it, here's how to take.
Well, we can also include it in Helm documents. So docs.helm.sh could include it.
Yeah, I was thinking of just like piecing it together in like either Medium or a Google Doc or whatever. We can all review it, make sure we're happy with it. Google Doc, I should have said, is probably more appropriate.
Yeah, because we want to look at some of those. And let's see, there is, if you're interested in that, hold on. Go. So if you're interested in that, there is a link. Have you seen this before?
I'll have a look. I think I may have seen this one.
Scott and I were also talking about this the other day, and we were thinking it'd be nice to have like a kind of step-by-step guide for the different scenarios. Like, you're you're just kind of like a hobbyist chart developer, and you want to quickly host it somewhere, and GitHub pages is a good place for you. Or you want to set up kind of a chart repository that you're going to use more intensely on S3 or some other cloud object store, or that's where you're running your Kubernetes clusters and want to pull from. Or if you want to set up authentication, you might want to use Artifactory or Chart Museum. So I think it'd be good to like outline when those different options are useful to people.
Yeah, and we can start this with just basics and then move into more, right? We don't need to get the whole structure. We can start small and then iterate and grow the documentation. But I think object storage and GitHub are probably two really good ones to start with. And one thing I would like to see in these is signing included, like documentation on how you could use signing in this. And I know that the Helm GitHub plugin that Matt Butcher wrote actually looks for your .prov file, your provenance file, to make sure that to upload that as well if it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Is the Helm GitHub plugin something you can use from a CI, or? Yeah,
you would just have to have your CI make sure it has access, because what it does is it adds and pushes to the docs directory any of your stuff. So it updates your index file and things like that. And so the user that does it needs push rights in your CI in order to make those changes.
Okay, yeah.
I actually have
Yes.
a Helm chart that I'm using GitHub pages for and using the GitHub releases to host the binaries for it. So I can at least write up that. If I don't find a better write up to base it on.
This is what we're doing for Monocular as well.
Yeah,
It's a little bit more complicated because it does things like bumping the chart version and stuff. But essentially the same thing really.
and I know Weaveworks Flux does something similar. They actually host theirs this way for Flux. This would be actually a good one to get in initially. Something we demoed in SIG Apps recently.
I think I may have even seen a blog post or something from Weaveworks on how they were doing it.
Yeah.
So I'll see if I can hunt down that as well.
Yeah, I haven't looked at how their automation works for this or what they're doing with it, but they have a chart subdirectory on the Flux project, which has all of this stuff. So. Yeah, and their README is what's generated into the index file. I think it is, and then yeah. Okay. But it's something to look into, and then we can give examples, and we have folks that we could include. Okay, yeah, and then there's the object storage if somebody wants to take that one on ways folks can use that. There is an S3 plugin too. It's called Helm S3. I think all I have to do is search for it. And this actually has things like a push command. So you can push things and deal with that.
There's also a plugin for Google Cloud Storage. I've used that in my last project.
For which one?
For Google Cloud Storage.
Oh, cool. Do you know what that is?
I'll look it up. Wait a minute.
Okay, cool. But yeah, we could look at things like sharing some of these plugins, which will help folks, I hope, get going on it.
There we go.
Okay. Sweet. So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to see if we could get the ball moving on getting the site up. My personal goal is I would love to have the site running in September sometime. Which I know is not that far out, but I also think that it's not that much work. And I'll put in some real legwork on getting this stuff done if we need it.
Absolutely. You're talking about getting the site up and running as a beginning, right? I mean, I think the process of moving all of the individual charts from the current monolithic repo into distributed repos might not be as fast.
Oh yeah, I'm not looking to end to end. I'm looking for the first launch, right? Right. So there's kind of maybe two philosophies to this, and you know, it's get our whole house in order, get everything done. I don't expect this to ever actually be done. I think we're going to continue to iterate, refine processes, create bots and automation, improve Monocular, all these things over time, right? It's going to be a continuation thing. And I think actually deprecating the charts repo, first we need to launch what's next, and we can say that the charts repo is deprecated, and we're going to start deprecating things and pulling them out and looking for alternatives in other repos. We can announce that all at once, right? But we have to have that next step with directions on what people should do and the site, how the path forward is going to go. So we can continue to tell folks that, and then take their issues and requests and feedback and iterate on it. So I think launching something that has probably a stable incubator and a handful of other repositories like the Weaveworks Flux and probably the Open Service Broker repo and a few others like that is a great first start in saying, here's the new thing. Here's documentation on how you can host your own. Here's how we're going to kind of migrate folks off, but we've got the site up and running, and then we can iterate on it, right? So I'd like to see
have a convo about how the deprecation process works at some point, just, you know, because whether that's to like a beginning today or later, because I'm thinking that right now we have a kind of, Well, just very in short, I'm thinking that deprecation might be better on a per chart basis as we move specific ones over. You know what I mean?
Sure, totally. I think you're absolutely right. Like, I fully expect Adnan, hint, hint, wink, wink, Bitnami to launch their own repository and maybe move all of the charts they manage in there to have more tight control on them, right? And when they do that, we might just go through and mark all the Bitnami ones as an example as now being deprecated. And maybe we even want to change, in the deprecation, we're going to say they're all in this other repository now, right? And that'll remove like a quarter of them or something like that. Or I don't even know what percentage of it is anymore, but it removes a whole bunch of them. And then they can now have more tight controls on their own processes and people and all of that and CI and when they want to do things. And, we would look at it that way as people move them out, or as we saw ones that were old and we were not going to maintain anymore. And somebody had a good one in place. We could say, okay, this is overcome by these other ones. And maybe even in those charts, when we deprecate them, we point folks to other options. Right?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and we can, as we do this, we can probably blog and post about it so that it encourages people to do the same thing.
And we have a Helm blog now, right? Helm.sh/blog. It exists. If you go to helm.sh, there's a blog link.
That's cool.
Posts are a pull request away. There are examples now because there's a couple of posts, and it's in the helm-www repo on the Helm org, and it's a pull request to get it in, and once it's merged, it's up. Reinhard, actually, when should we blog about your chart testing tool? Because that would be a good one to get up front early. If you want to write a blog post for that.
Yeah, good point.
Hint, hint, wink, wink. Yeah.
Nice.
Sweet. Yeah, I try and see.
Okay.
Did you say helm.sh/blog?
It's /index.html for now.
Okay.
Yeah. We need to get that fixed.
Is this hosted on S3 or something?
S3? Is Microsoft going to host one of their sites on S3?
Of course not.
Of course not. Yeah, we probably need to, it's hosted over there somewhere. So we need to look into how do we...
It might be Azure Blob Storage though, because the error looks
Azure
like
Blob
it's...
Storage.
Yeah.
It's Azure Blob Storage. And Azure Blob Storage has recently added features to make some of this better, but I don't know if it's been turned on over there. In fact, I'll add that to my to-do list.
I should say when I use the term S3, I generally mean blob storage in general,
Right.
which is interesting.
Yeah. All right, I added it to my to-do list to go chase them down on it. Oh yeah, and there's one on Remus, who, by the way, and he's onboarding. For those of you who don't know, Remus, he's one of the co-founders of Helm. He worked on Helm version 1, but has been mostly off for some time. He's going to start being directly involved in things. He was recently hired in over at JFrog, working on Helm things, right? And so now he's intimately interested in all things Helm and storage, including charts and distributed search. And he's come to me specifically about those things. So once he's done onboarding, which I think has started this week or last week, and he's in California right now, we'll expect to see him showing up at our meetings and being involved and in efforts on that stuff. So we've got another body who's interested in this stuff. Which is great. Okay. I think this is a good start. Has anybody had anything else on the distributed search thing? Awesome. Should we talk about the issue in PRQ? Yeah, the issue in PRQ. We're down to 417 pull requests, which is just massive. It's just massive. And then there's issues. So there's a few things we can do about this, right? We could, so we've got old stuff in here. Oh, you know what? Nobody switched from the CLA to the DCO yet, have they? No. Okay.
Would that already work?
We need to figure out how to make it so everyone else can do it much more easily than us because they manually do it. But we've got these owners files and this merge automation. We need to figure out how to have the CLA and DCO apply the same label, to have a label applied so that way the merge automation can deal with it. So,
regarding this, I noticed something the other day in the branch protection rules.
mhm.
There's an option for requiring signed commits, and I'm wondering if this is built-in support for requiring DCO.
No, for the DCO, it's actually pretty easy. So sign commits is different than sign off. So DCO is sign off, and there's a bot for it. There's actually a pro bot. GitHub does it, operates it. DCO. This will do it. But
So the sign commits are the things when you need a GPG key.
yes,
Okay.
sign off is just signing off that you agree to it. I've got a blog post in the work that explains most of this stuff, including the commands on how to do it and all of those things, right? And how it works. Like all the most of the questions, frequently asked questions, all this stuff gathered together into a blog post we can do. And from the perspective of the CNCF, they've already given the thumbs up on it, saying
Looks like quite a few CNCF projects are already using this.
Hmm.
plugin.
the only projects that don't use the DCO under the CNCF are Kubernetes and gRPC. Everything else uses the DCO, and most of them are using this automation. It's in wide use.
Mhm.
But our stuff, so I'll give you a little background here. We're still using the Kubernetes test infrastructure, so owners files work. And that we're using something called Tide that handles the merge stuff. But is it here? So if you go look at this here, you'll see where how our merge automation works for our repo. All right. It actually goes through and says, does it have these 3 labels? And is it also missing these other labels? Okay. And before it will merge them. And so there's that whole CNCF CLA colon space yes one needs to be applied. Now, we currently should have this automated. If not, it's a bug in the config, and we can get that fixed pretty easily over here. But the DCO, in order for the merge needs to happen, is we need to have either the DCO should not apply the CNCF CLA equals yes one. We should probably have a different one here that says, authorized to contribute, right? And then we should have, whether it's got the CLA or the DCO on it, it's authorized to contribute, right? And then we take the CLA bot off for any of the new stuff that comes in and put the DCO bot on. So the new stuff will have the DCO and the old stuff will have the CLA because we've got all these things in there already, right? And the merge automation will work either way because we've got this crossover period. But how do there is no or in the labels here. It's an and situation. And so we need something that says, if you have the CNCF CLA, yes, also apply this other label, right? And then we need something that says, oh, when the DCO gets on, apply a label because the DCO doesn't add a label. So we need some kind of automation that handles this. And that's going to be our problem. We need someplace to run that, probably as some kind of webhook thing that lets us do this. And so we need an environment. We might even be able to get, there's Brigade instances out there and things like that. Maybe we run an instance of Brigade and craft this up with JavaScript or something. I don't know. There's a lot of ways we could do it, but we just need something that does this. And this is the blocker for us switching to the DCO right now. I forgot about this. I'm happy to start chasing this one down too. Because we need a place to host whatever that bot is that's going to do this for us. And that's part of the hosting discussion as well. Wherever we get it can host whatever code needs to do this. Let's see. So there's that. So in the meantime, there's also, you'll see Probot has another thing, which is the stale issue closer, which we no longer have stale issue closing, which is probably the reason some of this stuff is sticking around. That's been around for a while. Do we want to add stale issue closing to the charts repo?
Please. Yes.
All right. Now we can do things that says days until stale, and once it's stale, in activity it's closed, accept certain labels, those kinds of things. Did anyone have any preference for those settings? With Kubernetes, it went stale after, 60 days, and then after 90 days it was, no, maybe it was 30 days stale, 60 days rotten, 90 days closed, or something like that. Do we want to keep the same thing or go shorter?
I would probably go from stale to rotten directly. And
So we
make
could-
it shorter.
So do we say stale after 60 days and then 7 days close?
When we were first doing this manually, I think we decided on 2 weeks for stale and then another 2 weeks and closing. I don't know if we want to be that aggressive.
We had 10 days actually initially.
10 days, okay.
10 days. What do we want to do here?
So maybe I would do like, I don't know, 30 days to make for stale and like another, I don't know, 2 weeks to close it.
14 days? Okay. So
No, like let's say 30 days before it becomes stale.
So 30 days to stale. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I mean, if we make it shorter, we would also be required to review within that time frame.
And then how long after it's stale to close? 2 weeks? 1 week? 10 days?
Yeah, maybe 2 weeks.
I would say another 30 days just to.
Another 30 days until it's closed? What do you think? So we've got two different things here. Any other input? Any tiebreakers? Because I don't care.
I feel the same way. I think as long as it's a reasonable period of time where people won't get, feel slighted, that seems fine.
Yeah, I tend to make it shorter. I mean, you can always reopen an issue or a pull request.
That's true.
And if you comment, it's no longer stale. Just a single comment, it's no longer stale.
That's not true. That's my experience. As soon as it's stale, it doesn't matter if you comment.
Oh, sorry.
You're talking about preventative.
It probably depends on the bot.
It depends on the bot, right? And now we're not going to use the Kubernetes bot here. I'm suggesting we use Probot instead of the Kubernetes bot.
Okay.
Probot says after a period of inactivity, a label will be applied to mark it as stale, and optionally a comment will be posted notifying that it's stale. If the issue or pull request is updated or anyone comments, then the stale label is removed and nothing further is done until it becomes stale again. If no more activity occurs, the issue or pull request will be automatically closed with an optional comment.
That sounds pretty good.
So I would say, what if we did this? Stale after 30 days, close 2 more weeks?
Yeah.
A little aggressive, but it gives folks 2 weeks. And as long as you comment, the stale is removed.
Yeah, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
And we can even say, because there's a mark comment in here we can enable that says this issue has been automatically marked as stale due to activity. It will be closed if no more activity occurs, right? We can even go with kind of that default commenting style and let people know that if they comment or if there's any activity, it will no longer be stale.
It's also easy to remember, which is nice.
Hmm.
I'll take this to do on too, unless somebody else wants to. Does somebody else want to do the pull request for this?
Hopefully.
Sweet. I've given myself lots of work today. I'm happy to volunteer on things, I guess. All right. And then there is, of course, we got to find time to review stuff. All right. All right. So I dominated the meeting with my agenda items here. Anybody else have things?
Not really.
I'll say by the way, the big reason that I want to get to the distributed search out there is because our PR queue is growing. Folks are burned out on reviewing, and we've become quite terrible at it, and it shows. And the faster that we can get moved off of this onto a different setup, the faster we don't look bad.
Yes.
And people are unblocked.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, folks. I don't have anything else. We've got lots of to-dos to check up on in a couple of weeks. Oh, I do have one question. Is there a good Helm chart for running Monocular in a setup like this?
In a setup like,
Like we're going to actually run it for a public service with scaling and those kinds of things and
Yeah.
metrics on it and monitoring and logging, all that?
the existing chart works pretty well for that. We actually used the chart to deploy it.
Okay.
Bitnami. There's a value that you need to set to disable the in-cluster features. This is a feature flag.
Okay.
I think it's all in the README, but
Okay.
feel free to ping me if you have any questions about that.
I'll probably go start poking at this stuff as well to make sure I understand how to operate it, because a few of us should know how to operate this thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet.
It doesn't really have any metrics built in.
I was actually less thinking about metrics and more thinking about monitoring and logging.
Okay,
Bugs
yeah.
and errors and things. You know, I've run lots of production things and been on call for stuff, and I really like good logging and information. So when things go sideways, you know what went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Does the CNCF have logging monitoring systems we can hook up to?
No. That'll be on us with whatever environment we end up in. Running this thing to be able to tie into any of that monitoring logging stuff. I would say the whole world is starting to converge on Prometheus.
Mhm.
And I don't mean just Prometheus, but even Open Metrics. Are you familiar with Open Metrics? All right. So for those who aren't, this has come out of the Prometheus folks. It's basically their API standardized, so lots of folks can do it. So even if you're not going to use Prometheus, you're going to swap it out with another tool. The APIs all work. And I know there's other tools. I want to say Manaska supports the Prometheus API. So and that's an OpenStack project. So it can pull from applications that distribute their stuff as Prometheus. They can do it. And so the Prometheus folks came out with Open Metrics to try to standardize this so tool interoperability can shoot up.
As for logging, we can probably set up something. If we're on a cloud, we can probably just hook into the existing logging thing, or we can just set up like a Kibana Elasticsearch stuff.
Or if it's not huge, we might even be able to get away with a paper trail or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Let me go chase down the host.
There's actually just one API server, so I don't think. Yeah. We could just even.
And then there's also our bot stuff as well. And so our bot stuff could be another situation where we can run that in the same cluster. And then if we want to eventually get into things like making sure these repositories do things, we could grab the config file and iterate over those repositories every so often and scan them for certain characteristics.
Mhm.
We could write bots and jobs that do that and then run them in this place. And so I think there's opportunities for a number of things to log and to have an environment like that.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So it sounds like we probably do want to try and get a Kubernetes cluster from one of the providers.
Yep.
And just do it all in that.
Yep, and we're going to go see what is the most cost-effective way for us to do this, because free is better than cheap. So let's go see. We can chase some of this down.
Just wanted to note, Matt, I just put a link for you for later. Not,
Yeah.
my best piece of prose, but just helping us catch some things up.
Sweet.
Just reading it, I thought we were looking for a repo name on GitHub, which is not part of what you wrote, I think.
Oh no, the domain name I think is what we're looking for. Is it going to be Helm? Is it going to be
And I misunderstood.
hub.helm.sh, charts.helm.sh, that kind of thing?
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, if we have other starters that you want to add to the list, if anybody has other thoughts, we could throw them in there. I mean, I don't have any other ideas right now. But that's a good question too, Reinhard. What should we call the repo?
Well, if we go with hub, we could just call the repo hub. If it's going to be charts, that won't work. We'd have to come up with something
Right.
else.
That's so
Right.
true.
I think it's probably going to be dependent on what we come up with as the name, right? Or it could be charts.helm.sh, right? We could name it for the thing. I don't know.
Mhm.
There's lots of options. So that's why I was kind of curious to come up and see the name first.
Makes sense.
Atlas, there you go. Chart Atlas. I like that.
Yeah.
Didn't think of that.
Fits the theme.
I like it. Okay. Sweet. If I have any comments, I'll give them in here. I won't review it live because, yeah.
I made it so that anybody can edit it. So just
Sweet.
whatever.
Cool. Do we have anything else we should chat about or get 9 minutes back? Thanks, y'all. I'll post the video online later today.
Cool.
Have
Thanks,
a
everyone.
wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.